The airport was loud as always. Rolling suitcases scraped across polished floors, boarding announcements echoed through the terminal, and exhausted travelers rushed from one gate to another, without looking twice at the people around them. But for Vanessa Cole, airports had never felt chaotic. They felt familiar. She moved through the crowd with calm confidence, dressed in a simple black coat and carrying only a leather handbag. Most people would have assumed she was just another passenger trying to catch a late-night flight. That was how Vanessa preferred it. No attention, no headlines, no security surrounding her every move. At 42, Vanessa had built a life most people could only dream about. Private investments, luxury aviation partnerships, and years of relentless work had quietly turned her into one of the wealthiest women in the country. But none of that mattered to strangers. To them, she was simply a black woman walking into a space where people had already decided she didn't belong. As she approached the first-class boarding lane, a few nearby passengers glanced at her, then quickly looked away. One man tightened his grip on his briefcase. A woman standing near the counter raised an eyebrow before whispering something under her breath. Vanessa noticed it. She always noticed it. Years of success had taught her something painful. Money could buy comfort, influence, even power, but it could not erase prejudice. Some people saw her skin before they ever saw her success. Still, she kept walking calmly toward the gate scanner, unaware that within minutes, one accusation would turn the entire terminal silent. And before the night was over, one flight attendant would make a decision that would destroy her career forever. Vanessa handed her boarding pass to the gate attendant without hesitation. The scanner beeped green instantly. Everything should have ended there. One quick scan, one polite nod, and she would have walked onto the plane like every other first-class passenger. But instead, the attendant's expression changed. Her smile disappeared. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she looked Vanessa up and down again, lingering just long enough to make the moment uncomfortable. Around them, passengers shuffled forward impatiently, barely paying attention. Then the attendant reached out and blocked the entrance with her arm. Vanessa stopped. For a second, neither of them spoke. The silence itself felt sharp. The attendant took the boarding pass again, staring at it harder this time as if expecting the information to magically change. A businessman standing nearby let out a quiet laugh under his breath. Another passenger turned fully around to watch. Something was wrong. Vanessa calmly explained that the scanner had already approved her ticket. She kept her voice steady, careful, controlled. She had learned long ago that people often judged not only her presence, but her reaction. But the attendant wasn't listening anymore. Her face hardened as she motioned toward the crowded economy line behind them. The gesture was subtle but humiliating, like Vanessa had wandered into the wrong place by mistake. A few people nearby began staring openly now. Phones slowly lifted into the air. The energy around the gate shifted. What had started as an awkward delay suddenly felt public. Vanessa felt dozens of eyes on her. And then came the accusation. The attendant suggested the ticket might not belong to her. Not directly, not loudly, but in the carefully chosen tone people used when they had already made up their minds. Vanessa's chest tightened. It wasn't new. That was the painful part. The private looks. The suspicion. The quiet assumption that a black woman standing in first class had to explain herself before being accepted. She reached into her purse calmly, prepared to show identification and end the situation peacefully. But before she could even unzip the bag, the attendant stepped closer. Too close. The movement was aggressive enough to make nearby passengers freeze. Vanessa instinctively pulled back, shocked by how quickly the situation was escalating. That was when someone in the crowd started recording openly. Now the attendant seemed even more determined, almost desperate to prove she was right. Her voice grew louder. Heads turned across the terminal. A child stopped walking beside his mother just to stare. Vanessa could feel the humiliation spreading through the gate area like a wave. Still, she refused to lose control. Her silence only seemed to anger the attendant more. Then, in one sudden motion, the employee grabbed Vanessa's arm. The terminal gasped. Vanessa stumbled sideways into the metal boarding divider, her handbag falling hard against the polished floor. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Several passengers immediately stepped backward, stunned by what they had just witnessed. For a moment, nobody moved. Not security, not the passengers, not even the other staff members standing nearby. Vanessa slowly looked down at the hand gripping her arm. and something changed in her expression. The calmness was still there, but now it carried something colder, more dangerous. The attendant must have sensed it too, because her confidence suddenly started slipping. The phones recording the scene were no longer hidden. Whispers spread rapidly through the crowd. One of the pilots near the gate had even stopped walking, but the attendant had already gone too far to back down. And within seconds, the entire airport was about to discover exactly who Vanessa Cole really was. Vanessa slowly pulled her arm free. The entire gate area had fallen silent now. Even the boarding announcements in the background seemed distant. All attention was locked on her. The flight attendant tried to speak again, but her voice no longer carried the same confidence. The anger that had fueled her moments earlier was beginning to crack under the weight of the crowd staring back at her. Vanessa bent down calmly and picked up her handbag. Then she reached inside. Several passengers leaned forward, watching carefully. Phones remained raised. Security officers were finally approaching from the far side of the terminal, moving quickly after hearing the commotion. But Vanessa wasn't panicking. She removed a slim black card holder and held up a single identification badge. The reaction was immediate. One of the pilots standing near the gate froze mid-step the moment he saw it. His face drained of color. Another airline employee whispered something under her breath before covering her mouth in shock. The flight attendant looked confused at first. Then she read the name, Vanessa Cole, chairwoman, majority owner. The airline logo printed beneath the title seemed to hit harder than any scream ever could. The attendant's expression collapsed instantly. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Around them, whispers exploded through the terminal like wildfire. Passengers who had been quietly recording seconds earlier were now staring in disbelief. Some turned their cameras directly toward the attendant, others toward Vanessa. And suddenly, the balance of power had completely shifted. The same woman who had been treated like she didn't belong was now revealed to be the person who owned nearly the entire company operating that aircraft. But Vanessa's face showed no satisfaction, only disappointment, the kind that cuts deeper than anger. She looked around slowly at the silent crowd, at the employees who had watched everything happen without stepping in, at the passengers who had assumed the worst before knowing a single thing about her. And in that moment, the humiliation was no longer hers. It belonged to everyone who had stood there and allowed it to happen. The attendant's hands began shaking. Security finally arrived, but they no longer knew who they were supposed to question. Because the truth had already changed everything, and what Vanessa said next would leave the entire airport speechless. Vanessa stood there for a moment, surrounded by silence so heavy it felt impossible to breathe through. The crowd that had watched her with suspicion only minutes earlier now avoided her eyes completely. Some passengers slowly lowered their phones. Others looked down at the floor, ashamed of how quickly they had judged her without knowing anything about her life. Then Vanessa finally spoke. Not with rage, not with threats, but with honesty. She explained that she had spent years building the airline into a company that promised dignity, professionalism, and respect for every passenger. Yet standing in that terminal, being publicly humiliated because of the color of her skin, she realized something painful. Success had not protected her from prejudice, and if it could happen to her, it could happen to anyone. The flight attendant was removed from duty that same night. Internal investigations began immediately after the videos spread across social media. Within hours, millions of people were watching the footage, debating it, reacting to it, and sharing their own stories of discrimination in airports, restaurants, stores, and workplaces. But for Vanessa, the moment was never about revenge. It was about exposure, because racism rarely announces itself loudly at first. Sometimes it appears in a suspicious glance, a delayed reaction, an assumption about who belongs and who doesn't. And by the time it becomes obvious, the damage has already been done. That night, Vanessa boarded the plane quietly. But she boarded changed, not because she had discovered something new about the world, but because the world had once again reminded her how quickly people can strip away someone's dignity based on appearance alone. And maybe that is the hardest truth of all. How many innocent people have been humiliated, denied respect, or treated like threats, simply because nobody stopped to see them as human first? If this story moved you, share it. Talk about it. Because silence is often the thing that allows injustice to survive.